Welcome to Le Weekend, your essential roundup of French news on culture, business, the economy, and current affairs. We bring you a convenient way to catch up on the stories from the past week in France, plus an additional focus feature blending reportage and cultural context. You'll find a seamless recap of the week's most important headlines without losing any content from our previous daily format, perfect for those who want to catch up in just one episode. Le Weekend is designed to keep you informed and engaged with a lighter touch at the end. Let's dive in. These are the headlines on Monday, June 22nd. Schools closed as France's heatwave threatens to break records. Hundreds of schools across France remained closed on Monday, and nearly 2,000 are preparing to send students home early as the country braces for record temperatures amid a prolonged heatwave, as reported by RFI. France and Germany reached a deal on arms maker KNDS. In their latest effort to revive stalled European defense cooperation, Paris and Berlin aim to become equal shareholders in the European tank maker, clearing the way for a dual IPO, as reported by Le Monde. A petition was launched on Sunday by the Green Party calling for the implementation of a climate leave of up to 5 days per year. The aim is, in particular, to protect workers who are especially exposed to the heat wave, as reported by France 24. The headlines on Tuesday, June 23rd. Resistance fighter and historian Marc Bloch was inducted into the Pantheon, alongside his spouse Simone Bloch, the repository of national memory through one of the Republic's most symbolic ceremonies, as reported by Reuters. The lower house of Parliament voted in favor of Corsican autonomy. The constitutional reform aims at granting Corsica exceptional powers, although the future of its path remains very uncertain and could be impacted by the presidential election. The bill will now go to the Senate, as reported by AFP. A first step has been quietly taken towards the Europeanization of channel crossing management. As the Franco-British Migration Agreement, one in, one out, expires in October, the European Commission has presented an action plan in which France welcomes a recognition of the European nature of this issue. This is the first time a Commission document has endorsed the fact that this is a European problem, as reported by Le Monde. The headlines on Wednesday, June 24th. The first case of Ebola was identified in France in a doctor returning from the DRC. 5 passengers who traveled with the doctor on his return flight are currently considered possible contacts, as reported by Le Figaro. A citizens' convention proposes to return to 4-day school week in Paris, following a consultation surrounding the rise of sexual violence in Paris after-school programs. Acknowledging receipt of the proposal, the mayor of Paris said he would have no taboos, as less than a third of parents wanted to keep the current school schedule in the capital, as reported by Le Monde. France experienced a major power outage amid record temperatures in Europe. A heat-related incident with a transformer left around 68,000 households on Wednesday without electricity in the northwestern Finistère department as the heatwave continues to break records, as reported by Le Monde. The headlines on Thursday, June 25th. France's public debt increased again in the first quarter, reaching
3,536.1 billion euros. This represents a 75.6 billion euro increase compared to the end of the fourth quarter last year, now standing at 117.5% of gross domestic product, according to figures from statistics agency ANSEE, as reported by Le Figaro. France continues to experience an exceptional heat wave with historic record temperatures exceeding 40 degrees centigrade across much of the country for several days. Museums, city, tourists, and agriculture are all heavily impacted, while authorities are warning of this extreme weather event continuing this weekend, as reported by France 24. The headlines on Friday, June 26th. Paris banned public drinking as heat wave overwhelms hospitals. Drinking in public spaces and takeaway alcohol sales are banned as of Friday after the city's police chief said hospital capacity in the capital is nearing a breaking point, and fire brigade callouts had doubled to over 2,500 on Thursday alone, as reported by RFI. The European Commission has opened a formal investigation into French pharmaceutical giant Sanofi for possible obstruction of competition in the flu vaccine market. The group is suspected of abusing its dominant position by allegedly waging a smear campaign against a vaccine produced by an Australian competitor, as reported by Le Figaro. A court ruled oil and gas giant TotalEnergies must account for its clients' CO2 emissions. Since 2020, a coalition of advocacy groups and the Paris City Authority have taken TotalEnergies to court to force it to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. This latest ruling now requires the oil and gas major to include its clients' emissions in its own due diligence plan, which marks a significant step forward, as reported by Le Monde. You are listening to Le Weekend. And now that you're all caught up with the news from the past week, it's time for our focus story. Today we look at why the Pantheon in Paris made the news this week. The procession moved slowly up Rue Soufflot on the night of June 23rd as two coffins were carried through the warm Parisian air toward the great neoclassical dome that has loomed over the Latin Quarter for more than 2 centuries. The historian and French resistance fighter Marc Bloch, executed by the Gestapo in June 1944, and his wife, Simone Vidal, officially entered the Pantheon during a nocturnal ceremony that President Emmanuel Macron framed as a statement against intolerance. Bloch became the 84th person and the very first historian to be laid to rest among France's great and good. The setting itself is worthy of some context. The Pantheon's story begins in 1744 when King Louis XV fell gravely ill. After his recovery, he vowed to build a grand church dedicated to Saint Geneviève, the patron saint of Paris. In 1755, the king commissioned the renowned architect Jacques-Germain Soufflot to design the structure, envisioning a monumental building that would rival the great churches of Europe. The building would take decades and outlast its commissioner. Soufflot passed away in 1780 before seeing his vision completed, and the church was officially finished in 1790, ironically just as France was plunging into the French Revolution. In 1791, the basilica was transformed into a temple, pantheon in Greek meaning to every god, and destined to house the remains of France's great men. The revolutionaries chiseled their philosophy into stone. The Panthéon's pediment bears the inscription Aux grands hommes de la patrie reconnaissante, meaning to the great men, the grateful homeland. Voltaire was among the first to be interred, Rousseau followed, but the building's identity was not settled easily. Over the next century, it flip-flopped between church and mausoleum as one regime toppled the next. It wasn't until writer Victor Hugo died in 1885 and around 2 million people lined the street for his funeral that the Pantheon settled once and for all into the role it holds today. There are no strict rules about what qualifies someone for pantheonization, and the final decision is made by the French president. The regulation simply states that the remains of great men deserving of national honors will be buried there. Over time, those interred have come to include Émile Zola, Jean Moulin, Marie Curie, André Malraux, and Simone Weil. The choices are rarely neutral. Each one is a political act, a statement about what France chooses to honor and why. Pantheonization ceremonies have become ever more personal, designed to reflect the life of the individual being honored. The entry in 1964 of French resistance leader Jean Moulin featured a torchlight procession, echoing Moulin's description of the resistance as a people of the night. Now back to 2026 and the choice of Marc Bloch, which carries its own unmistakable weight. President Macron had announced in November 2024, on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Strasbourg, his intention to see this heir of the Enlightenment and his wife enter the Pantheon. Speaking at the ceremony, the president described Bloch as an ardent and tireless defender of secularism who suffered the consequences of the state anti-Semitism initiated by the government of Marshal Pétain, and framed the induction as a tribute to two lives in service of truth, freedom, and the Republic. To understand why this particular framing of the induction matters, it is useful to know a little bit of the context of the life that preceded it. Marc Bloch was born in 1886, an assimilated Alsatian Jew from an academic family in Paris, deeply affected in his youth by the Dreyfus Affair. He studied at the elite École Normale Supérieure, then spent time studying in Berlin and Leipzig in 1908 and 1909, before he would become one of the 20th century's most original thinkers. He fought in the trenches. During the First World War, he served in the French army and fought at the First Battle of the Marne and the Somme. After the war came academics. He was awarded his doctorate shortly after the war and became a lecturer at the University of Strasbourg, where he formed an intellectual partnership with modern historian Lucien Febvre. Together, they founded the Annales School and began publishing the journal Annales d'Histoire économique et sociale in 1929. That journal, and the intellectual movement it embodied, would reshape the discipline of history for generations. Annales was dedicated to overcoming disciplinary and national boundaries and promoting a more human, accessible history. Where conventional historians wrote about kings and battles, Bloch and Febvre insisted on the lives of ordinary people, on climate and agriculture, on economics and mentality. During the Great Depression, when Bolshevism, fascism, and Nazism threatened Europe, Bloch summoned historians to transcend racial and ideological formulas, engage in comparative, collaborative, and transnational projects, and use the tools of the social sciences to sharpen and expand their critical skills. In 1936, at the pinnacle of his career, Bloch was elected to the Sorbonne. There, on the eve of World War II, he completed his masterful two-volume synthesis La Société Féodale, 1939-1940, Feudal Society. Drawing on a lifetime of research, Bloch analyzed medieval ideas and institutions within the context of the intricate feudal bond, which laid the groundwork for the modern conceptions of freedom and political responsibility. And then the world collapsed. On August 24, 1939, at the age of 53, Bloch was mobilized for a third time, now as a fuel supply officer. He was a historian conscripted back into living history. Taking part in the Battle of France against the Third Reich's army in May-June 1940, he was subsequently subjected to the anti-Semitic laws of the Vichy regime and lost his lectureship at the Sorbonne. What Bloch did next was extraordinary. He wrote. Retreating to the so-called free zone, he composed between July and September 1940 one of the most searching post-mortems ever written about military and political defeat. His posthumously published essay L'étrange défaite, Strange Defeat, written from July to September 1940 and published only in 1946 after the war, denounced a French sclerosis, military, political, and social. In it, he wrote that French leaders did not just allow themselves to be beaten, but judged very early on that it was natural to be beaten. The book is today regarded as a warning about the rise of nationalist dangers and the price of complacency. He did not stop there. Taking refuge in the Free Zone, he joined the resistance and went underground in 1943. Arrested by the Germans, he was tortured and executed by the Gestapo on June 16, 1944. He was 57 years old. The liberation of Paris was less than 2 months away. His wife, Simone Vidal, died of illness in July 1944 in a Lyon hospital. Together, now they are buried where France places those it considers its finest. Bloch had also left behind an unfinished manuscript, the Apologie pour l'histoire ou métier d'historien, the historian's craft, a meditation on the purpose and method of history that he never lived to complete. His influence spread far beyond France. The Annales approach shaped sociologists, anthropologists, economists, and historians from the Americas to Asia, leaving a deep impression on historical imagination throughout the 20th century. The decision to bring Bloch into the pantheon at a moment when France and much of Europe are once again wrestling with questions of identity, belonging, and democratic backsliding was widely read as deliberate. Macron described the induction as a tribute to alterity, or otherness, against identity withdrawal, pointing to Bloch's Jewishness, his Alsatian roots, his European intellectual formation, and his resistance to occupation as facets of a single coherent life. His library was dispersed by the Nazis, the president said, but it is the seeds of his European genius that have spread and given birth to other scholars, like him, attached to our civilization of liberty. There is something very fitting about a historian being the first of his profession to enter the pantheon. Bloch spent his life arguing that the past is not an abstract ornament, but a tool for understanding the present. That history, done rigorously and with humanity, is a form of moral seriousness. The great dome that now shelters his memory was itself built on a promise, refashioned by revolution, repurposed by Napoleon, and ultimately settled into meaning by the death of Victor Hugo. It is a building that has had to decide over and over again what it stands for.
Thank you for listening to Le Weekend, your one-stop destination for the main headlines in France. Catch our weekly roundup every weekend wherever you get your podcasts. Stay informed.
Thank you.